How do I meet my soulmate? How do I move on from heartbreak? Does my dream relationship even exist? Are dating apps the only way I can meet people? Are all relationships this hard? This is Between the Sheets with Dr. Love. Each week, your host dives into sex, love, dating, relationships, and everything in between. Welcome to Between the Sheets with Dr. Love.
Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Between the Sheets with me, Dr. Love. Join me this season as we navigate love, relationships and life with very special guests. Get ready to laugh, cry and connect. I know these meaningful conversations will impart a little bit of wisdom and a lot of love to you. So let's dive right in. Olivia, thank you for joining us today on the episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, look, I've done obviously lots of Googling and working out who I think is worth having on the episode or the podcast, and you're definitely one of them, especially that you're here in Adelaide.
Thank you.
But I just want to know, the CEO's wing woman.
Yes.
Give us a snapshot of what that is. What does that mean and what does that encapsulate?
So the phrase is actually coined by my clients. So I started consulting about 3 years ago, and I think for the first 12 months, my branding actually wasn't overly exciting. I probably didn't put a great deal of focus into the branding. And I think that was because in the early stages, what was really important to me was to support my clients fully and just go all in with them, act as their close contact, their best friend in business, and really support them through the daily grind and the highs and lows, I guess, of running a business. And it was probably around 18 months in, I decided to re-look at my branding. I didn't really love my branding when I first launched. I was like, that'll do, and I'll just get started. So I worked with a branding consultant. We put together the branding. I wanted it to be old school meets new school because people who know me, I'm a little bit old school in some ways. I'm a traditionalist, but I definitely have that newer modern edge to me as well. So that's how the branding started. And it was during that process where we went through the discovery questionnaire that you often do when you're developing branding, that we uncovered this statement, so this tagline of the CEO's wing woman. So that's sort of how it came to life. But I think if you ask me where it came from, it probably dates back much further than that to my childhood. So that's where it all began.
So you were doing what in your childhood to come up? I mean, who even knows about a CEO as a child?
Me. So I grew up with a mum that had a global beauty brand, and she still does. So she started that business when I was 18 months old. And so if you can imagine me as an 18-month-old, I then grew up in this business. So mum would bring me along to all of her business meetings. In the school holidays, obviously I would go there and I would work from the office. I would shred the paper. I would, go and get the coffees. I would write business plans in my spare time in the school holidays as well. So I just loved this whole idea of being in business because I'd seen it modeled my whole entire childhood from my mum. So that's really where it started. And I think as a child as well, I was a bit different. I could always sense that I was a little bit different to the other kids, and I probably was into things that maybe weren't that normal for a child.
Were they beyond your years?
So beyond my years.
Yeah.
And I think that's what mum always said to me growing up. She's like, you never are at the stage that you're at. You always want to be leaps and bounds ahead.
It's so hard as a parent. I have this struggle with my children. When you're 14, I want you to act 14 because I want to parent you as a 14-year-old. But you're acting 18 or 19. I'm confused on how to parent that. So I get your mum's struggle. It's hard.
Yes. And I think even with my own kids as well, every kid is so different. And I think between my three, I can definitely see differences in them of, I've got one that's more mature, and then I've got another one who's probably a little bit more independent and his age. So I think it is quite different across kids as well. But yes, that's essentially where it began, and spending a lot of time in bookstores as well, in the personal development, self-help area, reading the Tony Robbins books and Donald Trump's real estate books, and then all of the, personality profiling. I just absolutely loved all of that stuff as a kid. So I think looking back now, I'm not surprised that this is the career path that I've gone down.
So you really were the CEO's wing woman.
Literally,
That's what you were.
I was like the handbag that mum would bring along to her meetings. And it was funny as well because I remember as a child, people would always underestimate me. Like we would go into these meetings and I remember there would be, big accountant hotshots, and they would be really interested in a beauty business, of course, because everybody knows beauty businesses are extremely high margin. And for an accountant, they're rubbing their, their hands together at that. So, they would probably think, it's just her 6-year-old daughter. just her 8-year-old daughter, just her 10-year-old daughter. And, little did they know when the meetings would end, Mum and I would sit down and I'd say, no, don't like him. Something was off with his energy. Something's not right there. And I would actually give her feedback from the meetings as well as to my interpretation of that person and whether I thought they were going to be a good match for her and have the same values. So it was really funny as a kid.
It's actually interesting that your mum even gave you space to do that and really acknowledged you as a young woman, but gave you time and to listen to your feedback.
Yes.
I think that sets us up as a woman in business to feel heard.
Definitely. Yes.
A lot of us aren't given an opportunity to feel heard as we're going up through business, whether it's, a lot of the time dads that are running the business. I know through my generation, it was a lot of the dads that ran the businesses and the mums stayed home. So we weren't given much of an opportunity to have a voice or have an opinion or, hey, I could have some influence here.
Yes.
So it's no surprise that you moved into, being the CEO wing woman, but also being a person of influence.
Yes.
Because you had that very on.
Myself that way.
Well, you must be, because if you're helping out those people in business, you must have some form of influence over the way that they do business.
Definitely. I think I've just been very passionate about everything that I've ever done. I've always been very passionate. And I've also been very direct. I'm an Aries. My astrology is Aries.
Too.
Are you?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. So we are strong, independent, bold women, but we're also very direct. And I think sometimes I know for me, a lot of people can maybe be a bit offended at times, or I might come across a bit strong. But if there's something that they know, they will always get an honest opinion from me.
Yeah,
I'm not the type to sugarcoat something or, say I believe in something if I don't. So I think that's maybe where the influences come from, because they know if I'm saying something, I wholeheartedly mean it and I'm fully behind myself.
There's no BS. This is what you're getting.
Yes.
Yeah, straight shooter. I think very much, and I know that, we're talking about astrology now, but I know that a lot of Arians are very result driven.
Yes.
And we want to see results. So it means that sometimes we have to have the awkward conversation to get the results. And not everyone is good at that.
I think as well, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And I think Aries are always very good at giving the truth.
Yeah.
Whether it's well received or not.
Yeah, I think it's our delivery. I think that's where we've got to be mindful of how we're delivering the truth. I agree.
Yes. And that's taken me a long while to fully perfect.
Yeah, we get better at it. And I think the more that we do it, the more experience we have, whether it's in business, family, relationships, we start to learn our mojo. And that's for everyone, doesn't matter what astrology sign you are. You start to learn how to give feedback so that it's heard rather than, tell someone, what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Yes, definitely. And I think as well, becoming a parent is a big part of that, because that's where you truly realise that you actually don't have control, and
that's hard.
That is hard.
It's like you just want to say something and someone listen.
Yes.
That actually is not how it works.
Yes.
I wish it did.
I know.
It would take the stress off, right?
I think as well, you very quickly learn about personality types as well when you have kids, particularly if you have, sort of 2 or 3 children, because the comparison between each child's, acceptance or ability to conform or the way that they receive information is all a bit different. So what might work for one child may not work for the second or the third. So you really start to learn how important that aspect is to understand the personalities.
It's really true when they say, the children are your best lesson, right? They're going to teach us the most about self and others.
Yeah.
Because having to be flexible about how you thought you would be a parent. I know for me, I thought I'd be a particular type of parent. Totally out the window.
That was me as well.
I'm so not that parent.
Sometimes
I don't know who I am.
Yes.
When I'm like, is this actually me? Am I actually allowing this to happen? Because this was a no-go zone for me, before I was a parent.
It is different though. You can try and explain it to somebody. This is what it's going to be like when you become a parent. But no one can really explain that to you until you've lived through it yourself. So I think that is definitely true for me as well. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And I know Mum used to say to me, and I don't know if you got this, you'll understand when you're a parent. I'm like, no, I won't. This is just how things are.
Yes.
But now I get it.
Yes.
I'm like, that's what she meant.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. So I love the name. I loved where it came from. When you're working in business, are you, is it a coaching space? Is it, what type of work are you doing with these people?
It's both. So coaching for me is much more around trying to help your client overcome something, some type of blockage or limiting belief or pattern that they're in that they need to become unstuck. And my belief with coaching is that you don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert the way that you do if you're a consultant.
Yep.
So for me, coaching is more one-on-one. This is the direction that you're being given. This is what I want you to go away and implement. If it's business coaching, these are all the things I want you to work through, and you would task the client. So I do some of that, mainly with startup, and that's generally because they don't have the budget to support a one-on-one consultant fee, because the investment for that is obviously a larger investment than for coaching, where they're doing all of the implementation themselves. With consulting, you do need to be a subject matter expert. And I actually wrote about this morning on social, saying the 3 main things that you look for. So making sure the person is adequately educated, they've got the experience, and they have the same set of values, because when you're consulting, it is a collaboration between you as the client and the consultant. You need to work together, meet each other in the middle, and do as much as you possibly can to make sure that the relationship's successful. So the consulting work is more strategy and advisory with the implementation. So rather than me saying, these are all the things that you need to be doing, you go away and do them, I would do the doing. So it provides them with an implementation service as well as the advisory.
And did it always start that way?
Yes.
So from the beginning, you knew that was going to be the service that you deliver?
I thought it would be a lot more advisory led and maybe less implementation led. But I think once I got started, I realized that there were all these things that were outcomes from the sessions. And then you almost want to have the resources in places in those businesses for them to go away and implement the work, but they might not have adequate resources. So they were requiring a lot more implementation support than maybe I first realized. I thought it was going to be a bit more like, let's catch up, have a 4-hour board meeting each month, and then they would go away and do the things.
Yeah, right.
But not everybody has all of those skill sets in the business to go away and do that work in-house.
Yeah.
So they were looking to me for a lot of that implementation support. So that was probably one thing I thought would go that way that ended up going in a different way.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely.
So you heard the need and then you did the shift.
Yes.
You went, let's do the shuffle. This is what they're asking for.
Yes.
And this is what I need to give them.
Definitely.
Yeah, right.
I did put a lot of thought though into the structuring of the packages and the services to work out, okay, what are the inclusions and, how am I going to price that? So I did put a lot of effort and thought and consideration into putting those initial packages together. And I think that was successful because I was blessed to have booked out the first day that I launched the business and then had a lot of success quite quickly. So clearly the product and market fit was there and was right.
So when did you launch? How long's it been going? What year did you launch?
1st of July 2019 is technically the
launch
official date.
Yep.
I don't think I actually launched on socials though until the first week of August. I think I had a full month of sort of just getting set up and all the rest of it. And then it was the first week of August. So, yes.
So that was
2019.
Just before the pandemic.
Just before COVID. Yes.
So how did that influence you going into business?
So I launched the business. Obviously, I had no idea what COVID was. None of us did back then.
Yeah.
And, I left a business that was really successful at that time, and I was a general manager. So I was clearly, a senior person in that business, very secure in my role. As an individual, I love and value security. That's a big thing for me. I'm not at all a risky risk taker person, although I'm an Aries and I'm adventurous and spontaneous.
Can be different to risky.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm not risky. So I made the commitment to myself to launch the business, and that's what I did. And then, of course, 6 months later, we had COVID develop and come to light. And that was really scary because I thought to myself, oh my God, I've just left my job. I've just brought on all of these clients. All of these clients are going to be impacted by COVID. Where is that going to leave me? Where is that going to leave them? What's going to happen to their businesses? Yeah. So there was a lot of, not fear, but I guess there was those types of feelings at that time for a good, couple of weeks or so, whatever it was. And I remember at that time thinking, I need to get some better boundaries in place because I was getting contacted like quite heavily from clients, and this is just before COVID. And then as soon as COVID hit, I went, forget boundaries. Yeah. Boundaries have gone out the window. My clients need me and I'm going to go all in to support them. And that's what I did. So I was calling everyone. I was really hand-holding and I was being the CEO's wing woman through that process because everybody was scared. Yeah. None of us knew where it was going to go and what was going to happen. And for me, I remember at the time saying to clients, there's going to be a packaging shortage. You guys need to buy up all the packaging that you can get, make sure you've got all of your componentry locked away and you've got enough stock. This is definitely going to have a supply chain effect. I naively thought that's as far as it was going to go. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect it to be what it has ended up being.
Buying one packet of toilet paper.
Well,
and,
exactly.
No meat.
Yes. It's been a lot bigger than a packaging shortage, the sickness and the lives lost and economic damage, all the rest of it. So it was a really hard time, I think, for a lot of clients. Thankfully, we had the relief packages be announced quite quickly.
Yeah.
That settled everything down. Everybody felt like they could take a breath. Clients, but also us as a general public as well. We sort of felt like, okay, this is bad, but at least we've got a little bit of a lifeline here. And I think it sort of settled a little. Obviously, some industries were really badly affected and others weren't as badly affected. And I think luckily for me in this situation, I consult to e-commerce brands. And as we know, online shopping went absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So, Australia Post was putting 2,000 more posties on or something. So there was this huge explosion of online shopping and e-commerce had a massive growth spurt. So I was very fortunate to be in a position where they were the clients that I was serving and I wasn't, say, a specialist in the hospitality or travel sector because that would have been a very different outcome.
So it looked like you just... I think in times like that, and in all times, not just in business, it's just learning to be able to pivot when you need to, whether it's relationships, parenting, business.
Yeah.
And I mean, talk about pivoting. You would have already been a mum at that stage when you launched your business because you've got 3 children now. Is that right?
2 under 2 when I started, and then I forgot. Sorry, Charlotte. I fell pregnant in April 2020. So that was around the same time as COVID hitting. So I think we had the full shutdowns and everything in March. I've just realised I had a COVID baby.
Yep.
During lockdown.
You must have been really busy to forget that.
Yeah, really busy.
So you had the 3. You had the 2 boys.
Yes.
And then Charlotte was the COVID baby.
Charlotte was the COVID baby. And then to make matters more stressful, I then had 2 massive hemorrhages when I was 6 weeks or 7 weeks pregnant with Charlotte.
Yeah, right.
Both times I thought I'd lost her. Well, I didn't know it was a her at that point, lost the baby. And I ended up having what's called a subchorionic hematoma, which is where a blood clot forms in your uterus and the baby shares your uterus with a gigantic blood clot.
Oh, wow.
There was 2 hemorrhages about 3 days apart and I had to go through all of that stress. And then on top of that, my obstetrician advised me that I needed to be on bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy.
That's hard.
That was hard.
Yeah.
So no lifting the other kids. I couldn't even go for a walk around the block like it was proper bed rest.
So you were working from bed?
Yes.
Pretty much.
Literally working from bed. And at that day I'd booked up 3 days because that was my plan with the business. I wanted to work 3 days a week. So I had 2 days with the kids. Then COVID hit. Then I fell pregnant with Charlotte. Then that happened with my health and with the pregnancy and I had to have more support around. My husband is a builder and he is quite committed with what he's doing. So that wasn't an option for me. So I thought to myself, right, I'm going to have to scale the business, bring on more clients and I will hire a nanny full time. And that's what I did.
Yeah, right. So you got resourceful.
Got resourceful.
Yes. You saw there was a need and you thought, how do I make this work?
Yes, I had to. I didn't really have a choice because it was either I shut the business down and I left all of my clients that I built a relationship with over that 9 months in the lurch, or I pull my socks up, right, I'm scaling the business, I'll bring on some more clients and I'll hire some support full time. So that to me seemed right and felt right for me. So that's what I did.
So almost like in your blood to have business and children. You grew up like that. Mum had a business and had you there as a child. And it's almost like you're doing the same thing. You've got this business, you're the CEO of your own business and you've got these children around you. Do you find the balancing act difficult or it is what it is?
Of course. I think as a human, we always would find things difficult. I think it's just how I approach life though. And I think when I'm faced with a problem, I might get upset for a day about something, if it's particularly bad or whatever, but I sort of just look at it and go, well, this is the way that it is and this is what I need to do. And so I just get on with it. And I think as a child, it's really funny because I remember during my teens when I thought about being a mum, I thought I'm going to be the mum that stays home, that bakes the cookies and the cupcakes for the school carnival. And
did you really?
I thought I was going to do all of those things because of course I wanted to model the opposite behaviour of what I saw. And then it was really funny because when I became a parent, I think I really realized who I was because I was about 25 when I had Henry, my first. And so I think at 25, you're really starting to settle into who you are as a person and your values and all of that. And I think I realized that I was actually a better person being a working parent than if I tried to force myself into being this craft mum person that I genuinely wasn't. And so I think I've been able to be more true to myself and therefore a better parent because I've gone into it that way.
Yeah, because it resonates with you.
Yes.
I wonder why, and I mean, shed some light, why did you choose to do the opposite? What was it? Did you not like how your mum was working and you were there? Why did you consciously go, I'm going to be the opposite to what my mum was?
Sorry, Mum, in advance. I think as a child, there are a few key things that you remember. And of course, as a child, there are certain things that happen in your childhood that you really hang on to the memory of.
Yeah.
And I just remember being the last kid to be picked up from school, like sitting on the fence outside of school waiting to be collected and being the last child there, being the last one to be collected from daycare or from after school hours care and all those types of things. So I think for me, I really wanted to be one of the kids that had the special lunchbox packed with, you know, all the good stuff, the Yogo and the LCM bar and all that stuff. And so I think I really rebelled for a lot of my childhood and teenage years of if mum said something, I wanted to do the opposite. You know, mum was very natural, for example, still is. So she was very much, you know, if you've got period pain, have a banana. You know, you're not having... You
need the potassium, you're not having aphrodisiac.
Yeah, and like there was no sugar, there was no Cocoa Pops or Fruit Loops or any of that stuff in our household. It was like, I was actually saying to my husband this morning, because I put peanut butter on my toast and it was the more natural version. And he's like, oh, that's disgusting. I hate that peanut butter, da-da-da.
Give me the one with the salt and the fat. And
yes. And I said to him, you're lucky that this is what we get, because in my day, Mum used to go to Goodies and Grains at the Central Market and there was this machine where the peanuts went in and the peanut
you get it
butter.
in the container.
Yes, and there's like no additives or anything. I
actually don't mind that one.
So that's what I was used to. So I think, I always went against it. If Mum said, oh, you know, I want you to take some probiotics for your stomach or whatever to make you feel better, I'd want the antibiotics.
Yeah.
So it was like if she said it was red, it was blue.
Yeah.
And then eventually I just got over myself and here we are.
Yeah. Was that because you said you felt different?
Yes.
And some of those things would have made you feel different because you
Definitely.
probably were. Like kids were having LCM bars.
That, and also I think it was a whole unconventional because, as you say, I'm 30 now. So going back that many years, it was more common to see a mum or a woman on home duties than it was a CEO of a business.
Yeah.
So I think that was one fundamental difference. But also I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
So I was born into a Jehovah's Witness family, which is a very intense religion. It's a very strong commitment to the faith. And so we didn't believe in birthdays, Easter, Christmas, any of those main events, the tooth fairy, any of those things. So at school, I would always be segregated from the group during Easter
they
time.
Celebrated those moments.
Yeah. So I think I was always quite used to being a bit of a black sheep and maybe different from others from that religious aspect as well.
Did you carry on that faith with your own family and your children?
No. So I actually left the faith when I was 12. And while I'm very thankful for a lot of the things that the faith taught me, you know, all the basic Christian values, being a good person, etc., I really value that. And I think it gave me a level of discipline now that I'm also very thankful for, because I think discipline for me is really important at being, you know, if you want to be successful at something, 9 times out of 10, you need to be disciplined.
Yeah.
So that's been really good. With my kids though, I'm probably part Christian, part spiritual. Okay. I really value the new age. Like I believe in, you know, the universe and energy and all of those things. So I think I'm a bit of a cross between the two, although, you know, that's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but that's just how I am with my kids.
But it works for you and your family. So those, you are having those celebrations now. You do celebrate birthdays, you have Easter, Christmas. Are those things that you celebrate in your home with the children now?
Yes, but I'm very average at it. You know, it gets to Christmas time and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this elf.
Yeah.
Can someone explain to me? Because it's got to
hide on the shelf somewhere.
Yeah, there's like all these things that you have to know that I just don't know about because I've never had to. I'd never experienced that. So I actually had to teach myself and ask a lot of questions of other adults around me to say, guys, can you show me the way? George, my husband, can you show me the way? Because this is
don't know what to do.
Foreign.
Yeah.
And I think I've probably taken it a little bit too far at times as well, because I have this tradition now with the boys' birthday cakes and Charlotte now, of course, they have this extravagant birthday cake every year, and I pay hundreds of dollars to this amazing cake lady in Adelaide that makes them all of these excessive birthday cakes that are all themed. And so I think I probably take it too far at times because I want to make up for what I missed out on.
If I didn't have this cake, you guys are, and it's full of sugar and full of colouring, and you're going to get it all. Yeah, I get that. I get that. So you've been with your husband, George, for quite a long time. You have got 3 kids together. I don't know how long exactly you've been together, but I know you just
About 10 years.
So you just got married recently.
Yes.
I do recall seeing that journey and looked amazing.
Thank you.
So has any of this, the work and sort of the type of the work you're doing, you know, your passion in work, your upbringing, parenting, impacted your relationship in any way?
Oh, definitely. I think I'm still recovering from religious conditioning around intimacy. That's a big thing for that type of background. So I think that's one aspect. The work that I do in terms of consulting, he is extremely patient. I mean, as you have to be married to an Aries. But funnily enough, George is an Aries too.
Oh, wow.
So it's literally like
signs.
2 prime ministers trying to run the country at the same time. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But no, George is very patient. And he does put up with a lot because I work, obviously, extremely hard.
He understands your drive.
Yes.
As another Arian,
And he's also a business owner too, so he gets it. Yeah. And I think one thing that George has always been very good at is encouraging me to stay true to myself. And like I was saying before, with having kids and thinking that I was going to be this craft mum that stayed at home and did all those things, he knows that my work and my career is a big part of my DNA and who I am. And so he was always very good at holding space for me and supporting me with all of the work that I do, and he really cheers me on. So I'm very grateful to have a great partner and support person in him.
Which also would mean that he would hold space for you in intimacy too, right? Because that's sort of a bit of a work in progress when you've been conditioned around that. So can you just share what's the conditioning around the intimacy when you're coming from a faith like Jehovah's Witness?
Well, number one, as you know, we only got married in March.
Yeah.
So for 10 years, we'd been having children out of wedlock. So that was probably one of the major things of we didn't get married before we fully commenced.
Did you carry guilt with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you would know from your work and understand this, but it's subconscious. It's at the very deepest level. So even though it might not be up here and really...
It's womb level.
Yeah. So I think there was that aspect. I think as well with the religious background, there's a lot of fear around religion. You know, if you aren't a good person, you're going to hell. If this happens and that's going to happen. Everything is based around consequence and a healthy fear. You know, they would say a healthy fear of God. So there are all of those considerations. And because I was born into the religion, I think it's a bit different if maybe you go into a religion as an adult because you've already had all your pattern established as well. All your imprint years are done.
So you've decided this life is not for me. I prefer that. So it's a choice.
Yes.
Whereas you were sort of didn't really have a choice. That's what you're born into. Yeah.
And I think my brother was the same as well because I believe Mum fell pregnant with my sister at 19 and she was door knocked by a Jehovah's Witness, and that's what led her to the faith in the early stages. But my brother and I were both fully born into it. And it was interesting because my parents separated when I was about 4.5. Mum actually chose not to continue with the faith from that point on and didn't return back. My dad decided to carry on with the faith. So I had one household as still in the faith and one household that wasn't. So I sort of also had to float between the two. And I decided essentially on my own accord that I was going to stay in the faith until I was 12. I mean, I didn't decide that that was the year, but I continued on my own until I was 12. And then at 12, I decided that I was going to let go of the faith. And
did something happen at 12 for you to say, this isn't for me anymore?
I don't think there was like a pivotal moment, but I think it was probably the transition from child into becoming a woman. And, you know, I also moved schools at that time and I went into middle school. So it was that shift from primary school kid to high school teenager. And I think I just wanted to be like everybody else. I'd lived my whole life to that point being a bit different. And I sort of just craved fitting in, being a bit normal, and just doing all the things and not having to worry about, oh, you know, we need to sit you out from this assembly, Olivia, because we've got a Christmas presentation on today. And there was this constant segregation. So I think I just wanted to be normal.
Well, it's quite courageous at the age of 12 that you decide on what faith you want to be or what faith you don't want to be.
Yes.
And moving out of it, like that takes a conscious, decision, were you pushed back on any of your parents saying you shouldn't be doing that, or were they accepting?
No, they were very accepting. It was interesting though, because I got to 19 and I was very close with my yaya. This is my great-grandmother, so mum's mum, and she was still in the faith. And I went down to see her one day and she said, "Oh, Liv, will you come to a meeting with me?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll come to the meeting with you." So I went along and I was 19 and I sat through this whole meeting, and I remember sitting there in the audience, listening to the speakers, listening to the elders talk, and thinking to myself, I think I've made the right decision. It just didn't feel right. Didn't resonate with me. It didn't feel right. I was very happy to be there for my yaya, of course, and I think it meant a lot to her for me to be present there with her and have support. But yeah, I really decided at 19, I think it was the right decision for me, and it felt right. So I certainly didn't look back at that point and go, I've made a big mistake. I was at peace with where I was with that decision from that age onwards.
I think through our conversation today, there's been a couple of times where you go, it hasn't felt right, or it's felt right, or,
Yes.
I had an intuitive feeling. From being young with your mum in the business, you would turn around and say, "Mum, that doesn't feel right. They don't feel, it's something about them that doesn't feel right."
Yes.
Does your gut or your intuition, is that sort of lay a path for your decision making? Does that drive you?
Always. Always. I trust my gut instinct above all else, even where everything logically makes sense. And as a business consultant, that's what I'm trained to do. I look at a business, I look at the data, I look at the analytics. But if something doesn't feel right, even if all the data is suggesting X, I go with that, because it has never failed me. And all of the times that I've gone against it, I've failed myself because something.
And you're like, I knew I should
Yes.
listen to myself.
Yeah, so that is a huge part of me as a person. And I think it's a big part of my human design chart as well. My gut intuition is really strong in my human design chart. So it makes sense to me that I sort of am led a little bit by feeling and intuition. And I think EQ is really important.
Yeah.
IQ, yes, of course, intelligence needs to be there generally, but EQ is highly valuable in everything that I do
EQ,
as well.
you mean emotional intelligence?
Yes.
So obviously you've done the assessment for both. So
Yes.
having a high EQ is really important in business.
Yeah.
And the way we interact with one another, and the
Yes.
way that we, feel the room and gauge the business, even if the facts are saying one thing.
Yes, and I think it gives you a competitive edge as well to read the play.
Yeah.
This is something that my husband is very good at.
Yeah.
George has, honestly, the best EQ of any person that I've ever met. I will always look to him for feedback on situations because he is able to see things sometimes that nobody else can see. And so he has been a real support for me at times when I've needed to get that extra, feedback or opinion. So really important.
Did you get that feeling with George as well? Like, was it your gut led?
Yes, to be fair. So
Or your eyes first, or what was it?
Well, there's 2 years difference. So I'm 2 years older, he's 2 years younger.
Yeah.
And when I first met him, I sort of went, I was 21, he was 19. I went, oh, he's cute, larrikin.
Like young cute.
Life of the party. Like, he's cute, but not going to go there.
Yeah.
Don't be silly. And then I had a conversation with him. Done.
That's it.
You
knew.
Yep. As soon as I had a conversation with him, and it was that I saw. I saw the emotional intelligence, and I went, wow, this guy's really impressive. I judged him by his cover. I thought, he's this young life of the party guy. And yes, that is George. That's one aspect of him. But there was this whole deep current that ran underneath the surface that nobody else had. Well, maybe his closest knew that was a thing for him, but I certainly didn't see that at face value. And once I had a conversation with him, I knew that I was in trouble. I felt that inner knowing.
Your gut going, this is a guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and totally opposite to what I thought I would go for. Sorry, George, but he knows this already.
Yeah.
But he's a tradie, and he's not that I want to be racist, but he was Australian, and I always thought that I probably would end up with another European because Euros are very, like dominant, and we have a similar sort of ethos of how we go about things. So I didn't think that he would be the type of person that I would end up with. Not that there's anything wrong with him. It's just not what I thought that I wanted or
sometimes
needed.
we grow up in a family that makes us think and feel that we would end up with a particular person.
Yes, I thought a suit, like an accountant, a lawyer, something along those lines. And so I realized that he was actually everything that I needed. And he is a perfect complementary personality and type of person to me that keeps me grounded and just compliments me in every way. And I have this saying, I hate when people say 2 halves that make a whole.
You guys are whole on your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me. I don't want to be half a person without something else. I want to be full and complete in myself so that I can move forward with somebody side by side.
Another whole person would be great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was really important to me, and that's how George and I operate. And there's sort of enough distance between us as well. We're not like stuck together. There's a bit of distance and space. So he does his thing and I do my thing, but we always go together. We're a package deal. It's the running joke because everybody always says George and Liv.
Yeah.
It's like you don't really see one without the other.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. But I like how you say he was what I needed, not necessarily what I wanted.
Yes.
Because this is where people trip up in dating.
Yes.
Right. And I don't know, like, I mean, you're quite young when you met George, but you probably had a couple of experiences before him.
Yes.
And it was probably what you thought, it's probably more that what you wanted than what you needed.
Definitely.
And people get uncomfortable with going with what they need versus with what they want.
Yes.
And they reject what they need because, oh no, I want somebody to be European and wear a suit and tick all those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go there, but it's not what I need.
Yes. And I think, there's been a lot of hard times in my relationship with George as well because, we talk about the cultural aspect. Greeks are generally the type of people that are very passionate, they love hard. A lot of the time there's big arguments as well because everybody's so passionate and we speak our mind and we speak the truth and all the rest of it. And I found, sometimes with Australian culture, it's a little bit more reserved, a little bit more conservative. And sometimes we don't outwardly say the problem that we have with a person. We might be a little bit more undercurrent with it, or we might tell somebody else perhaps instead of telling the person that we have the problem with. So I found that quite challenging as well to sort of climatize to the family dynamic as well. And if there's one thing that we've been very good at as a couple, it's been weathering storms together. And I think upon reflection after 10 years of being together, I've realized that 99 times out of 100, George and I are on the same side as the problem. And that's a very healthy space.
Absolutely.
And place to enter any type of conflict with your partner. As soon as you're on the opposite side of the problem, that's
become your opposite.
Yeah, and that's when you become unstuck. And that's happened to us once in 10 years and it wasn't very pleasant. But I think I left that situation knowing how to manage conflict in the future and how important it was for us to be on one side of the problem and not on opposite sides and have the problem in between.
So that's really important for all relationships, whether it's intimate, children, business. There's always going to be some level of conflict.
Yes.
And it's, I think, how you approach it and making sure that when you are on the same team, you remember you're on the same team.
Yes.
And I think where couples get unstuck is where not only when they're not on the same team, is that when they forget what they're arguing about and the argument becomes about everything else except for the reason why they started arguing.
Yes.
Or
there's a lot of white noise as well, which can happen, where you sort of have to remove all the other stuff and get to the actual root cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess through all of that, you've got 3 children, you've got a successful business, you've got George that also needs investment, right? Because relationships need investment and time. How do you manage sort of your own mental health and self-care?
It's a work in progress. There have definitely been times where I've felt overworked and I've probably edged quite close to burnout. I don't know, and touch wood, I don't know that I would ever 100% burn out because I think it might not be in my DNA to get to that stage or let it get to that stage, but I've certainly been close. And I think I worked out about 18 months in that if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then you go together.
That's right.
And you need support. And when I really thought about it, I sat back and thought, okay, I am a working mum. My husband is also working. There's no wife that we're both coming home to that's done the cooking and the cleaning and taking our shoes off and pouring us a glass of wine and asking how our day is.
Yeah.
Because I'm at work. So I can't be all things to everyone. So I think I worked out that I needed support and I don't have a lot of family support. And neither does George. And that's mainly because our parents are quite young and they've still got lives of their own and their own businesses to run. So we decided that we were going to bring on the help. And so we got the cleaner, we got the nanny. We scheduled time for self-care. We book trips away where we can spend time with one another and reconnect in our relationship. We have time apart where, if I need to go away and have some time on my own, I can do that. Or Fridays, for example, is my day that I generally don't have client meetings. So if I need to get my hair done or have a massage or, do, a naturopath appointment or something that's for my own mental health, and I've got a day a week in my schedule where I can do that.
It sounds like, and you said when you were younger, you decided to be you thought you were going to be the opposite to your mother.
Yes.
It sounds like you actually are, because you're doing everything that's different to what she did.
Yes.
Right? So you are the opposite, but just in a different way.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I can see that.
So, you're this boss CEO woman, and you've got many wing people to help you be available for the kids.
Yes.
And schedule that time in. So you really have done what she's done, but very differently.
I do my best. I do try. And the kids are growing up a fair bit different to us as well, because we live on a farm.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time together as a family on the property and doing things. And like at the moment, we've got 6 lambs that we're hand feeding.
Oh, cute.
So there's lots of things happening all the time, and the kids are exposed to a lot of other things as well that I didn't get exposure to as a kid. So that I feel really good about too.
So talking about kids, if we look at you growing up, and not necessarily as a child, but just like one of your former selves, whether it was, last year, 5 years ago, as a child, as a teenager, if you had to look back as the person you are now, is there some advice you could give, yourself?
I think I would just tell myself that everything was going to be okay, and that I just need to enjoy the journey that I'm on and understand that everything that's happening is setting me up for something later in life. I think there were times as a child where I didn't understand why things were happening, and I wasn't sort of sure how that was going to relate to my future. But now looking back, I see everything that ever happened as the perfect grounding and apprenticeship, let's say, to go into my adulthood. So yeah, I would just say trust the process and enjoy everything as it is, and just trust that there's some greater meaning and that everything happens for a reason, because that's rung true for me now.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's important that us as women really do acknowledge, respect, and give space to our intuition. Because that's our superpower. Mm-hmm. And I think we forget that. And a few times on this, my episodes, I've spoken to guests, and a lot of the time, it's usually what you think first, and your gut feeling is the right one. Yeah. It's just through conditioning we've learned to doubt ourselves.
Yes.
And so just continually going back to that and knowing that there's a greater purpose here. It didn't work for a reason.
Always.
We didn't go into that deal because there's something better, and not being stuck on that dialogue of, oh no, it didn't work out.
Yes. Yeah. Very true. And not letting that bad day turn into a bad week.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. It was so good to share this space with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you to our sponsors, Sexyland, Australia's largest range of fun for adults, and Cassandra MAMONE for designing timeless pieces of jewellery that encapsulate classic design and modern inspiration. All advice given on the podcast is general in nature, and if you need a tailored approach to your wellness journey, reach out to the incredible team at SANARE Wellness for both traditional and alternative therapies. We acknowledge and pay our respect to the traditional custodians of the land that we gather on. We respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land, sea, and skies.
Thanks for listening to the podcast with Dr. Love. For all show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, head to www.drlove.com. That's DRLURVE.com. Got a question for Dr. Love? Email her at ask@dr.love.com. Love the show? Remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review or share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, lovers. We'll see you on the next episode. This is Between the Sheets with Dr. Love.